suggested that I shouldn't talk to you about this topic today. They thought that it might make you uncomfortable. They thought that you might not be able to handle it. Well, I respectfully disagreed with them. I think you're intellectually curious and mature. And I think you want to learn about new topics that will help you make a difference and change the world. So I didn't change my topic. I grew up in Goleta, which is a beautiful beach town in Southern California. And when I was in high school there, I knew a guy called Timothy. And he was the nicest guy in the world. Everybody liked Timothy. He was smart, he was athletic, he was funny, he was high energy. If you had a problem, you went to Timothy. Couldn't figure out your homework, he'd help you. Needed a ride, he'd help you. If you had boyfriend problems, he'd be the first one to give you advice. Just think of the nicest guy that you know, and that was Timothy. And we all thought he would grow up to be an amazing man. And instead, he grew up to be physically violent and ultimately was convicted of domestic violence. And I could not understand that. How could a guy who was so nice end up physically abusing the women in his life? How could I even know a guy who behaved like that? I was from this beautiful beach town. Guys who behave like that, they're from over there somewhere. I should know them. This really bothered me. And I decided I had to figure it out. So I read a bunch of research, and I talked to a bunch of experts, and I looked at a bunch of statistics, and here's what I found. All of us know a guy like Timothy. All of us know a man who mistreats women. We just don't realize it. The Center for Disease Control, all kinds of organizations have done research, and they've all found the same thing. About 30% of women in the United States will be hurt by a romantic partner at some point in time during their life. And when you do the math about multiple relationships over time, that works out to somewhere between 1 in 8 and 1 in 9 guys being physically abusive. And the vast majority of those men have their first violent relationship in high school or in early college. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor, it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, it doesn't matter how smart you are, about 1 out of 9 guys is physically abusive. Okay, well that answered my first question. How could I know a guy who behaves like this? They're not over there somewhere, they're right here with us. But what about that second part? What about that nicest guy in the world thing? I mean, we've all seen movies and TV shows with abusive men. You can spot them from a mile away. They're mean, they're drunk, they're angry, they're high, they're surly. They're not the nicest guy in the world. Well, it turns out that real life is pretty different than the movies. In real life, men who physically mistreat women hide in plain sight. In public, they look just like everybody else. They act just like everybody else. In fact, Timothy is a pretty typical profile of a guy who abuses women. You see, being really nice in public is a powerful tool for a man. First, it helps him attract women. And second, it helps him avoid consequences. If she tells anybody what's happening, he can just roll out his reputation for being so nice to discredit her. We all know men who hurt women, and when we learn that deeply disturbing, uncomfortable truth, we really don't want to believe it. I wrote an article on this topic last fall, and right after it was published, I was out at dinner with a group of my friends. And I gave everybody copies, and one of my girlfriends said, "Wow, Maura, this is going to change lives." And I got that wonderful feeling you get when you think, oh, I'm really making a difference. And then she went on, I mean, of course, I don't know anybody who behaves that way, but if you get this into the right hands, my friend is not the only one who doesn't get it. My friend is not the only one who doesn't want to believe that uncomfortable truth. No More is a nonprofit that is working to eliminate relationship violence. And last year they surveyed Americans, and they found that 80% of us believe that relationship violence is a problem in our country. 80%. 53% say they personally know a woman who has been a victim of domestic violence. 15% say it happens among their friends. Now that's not mathematically possible, but that's what we want to believe. And because we want to believe that, our friends get hurt. We oftentimes don't talk with teens about the realities of dating violence. And if a young woman finds herself in a violent relationship, she oftentimes has no idea what to do. Back in Goleta, Timothy had a girlfriend, and she loved math and science. She was going to be a doctor. She aced the SATs. She got into her first choice college. She got a huge academic scholarship, and she was on top of the world because she had all of that, and she was with this great guy, Timothy. They went off to college, deeply in love, and one day, out of the blue, Timothy became violent. She was stunned. She had no idea what to do. So she decided to keep quiet and pray that it would never happen again. And that was her first mistake. Decades ago, we had a lot of taboo topics. There were things we didn't talk about. We didn't used to talk about breast cancer or prostate cancer. We didn't used to talk about drug addiction or alcoholism. And we didn't talk about those topics because they made us uncomfortable. But what we realized over time was that if we talked about them, we found solutions. And if we talked about them, we made our communities stronger. Well, we don't talk about relationship violence because it makes us uncomfortable. It makes us uncomfortable to talk about the victims of relationship violence, and it makes us really, really uncomfortable to talk about the perpetrators. That woman back in Goleta, her situation got worse and worse. She was scared to death 24 hours a day. She was so scared she could hardly eat. She could barely function. She knew she had to leave Timothy, but she had no idea how to do that safely. So one day she went to her good friend Bob, and she gathered up all of her courage, and she said, "Bob, this is what's happening to me." And she just laid it out for him and told him everything. And when she was done, she had this little glimmer of hope that she might make it out of there. And she looked at Bob, and Bob said to her, "If you want to leave him, leave him. But don't go making up some horrible story about how Timothy has abused you. He's the nicest guy in the world. He would never, ever hurt you. I'm not getting involved in this. This is between the two of you." And when we hear that story, we think it's unusual and it's rare. But it's not. About 58% of women who are in violent relationships who tell friends or family that they're being hurt get no help. 58% get no help at all. I think those friends are all really decent people. I think they just don't want to accept that uncomfortable truth. It is far, far easier to say, "I'm going to stay out of it," or "She must be exaggerating," or, "She's been a little crazy recently," than it is to accept the uncomfortable truth that their friend, the guy they like so much, the guy they think is so, so nice, is actually violent and has deceived all of them. So whatever happened to that woman from Goleta? A couple weeks after she met with Bob, she escaped. And she escaped with the help of one friend who understood that uncomfortable truth, and another friend who didn't know Timothy and wasn't blinded by his charm. You see, I'm that woman from Goleta, and this is the first time I have ever in public talked about what happened to me. Right after my 22nd birthday, I pushed the reset button on my entire life. I gave up huge portions of my life to be safe, and other parts just disappeared because a lot of people didn't have time for the woman who had just left, the nicest guy in the world. So I started all over. I went to Stanford Business School on an academic scholarship, and I got my MBA. I met a wonderful guy who's loving and kind in private as well as in public, and we have two amazing, amazing kids. I built my career in the food industry. I founded a management consulting firm, and then in October of 2011, I got a call. It was a client, and he talked and he talked and he talked without saying anything. And finally, he got to the point. The project we were working on was being put on hold. One of the key team members from his company had just been accused of domestic violence and wasn't going to be available for a while. Do you know what the first thing was that went through my head? He's too nice. He can't possibly have done that. Me of all people, that was the first thing I thought. And that was when it came home to me that we really, really don't want to accept that deeply disturbing, uncomfortable truth that we all know a man who physically hurts women, and we just don't like to admit it. Well, this is all kind of depressing and discouraging, isn't it? But here's the thing. Once you know the truth, and once you accept the truth, you have tremendous power to make the world a better place. So you guys now know the truth, and you guys are accepting the truth. And that gives you the power to protect your friends and keep your tribe safe. Your new power has 4 parts, and I'm going to take you through each one of them separately. The first part of your power is that if a woman tells you she is being hurt by her boyfriend, you believe her, you help her, and you connect her to a domestic violence organization. Now, whenever I say that, there's always someone who says, but what if she is lying? So here's the truth. In 2011 and 2012, the government of Great Britain tracked statistics, and they prosecuted 111,891 cases of domestic violence. And out of those, they found that 6 were completely made up. Not 6,000, not 600, but 6 out of 111,891. The problem is not lying. The problem is violence. The second part of your new power is that you can listen for signs that your friends are rationalizing bad relationships. If you hear a woman say, oh, he only does that because he loves me so much, or, but he promised it will never happen again, those are signs that she's in a bad relationship, and again, get her connected to help. The third part of your new power is that you can influence your guy friends to treat their girlfriends well. All your life you've been told about peer pressure and how you shouldn't give in to peer pressure. Well, this is a time when peer pressure is really, really good. If you let your friends know that it's completely unacceptable to mistreat women, that will impact what they do. And that's particularly powerful if guys tell other guys that physically hurting women is totally unacceptable. Now, the fourth part of your power is for the women here. You can watch for red flags in private. If you start to see a growing gap between how your guy behaves in public and how he behaves in private, and you start to see that in private he's jealous, he's tracking your movements, he's monitoring your cell phone. He's trying to keep you away from hanging out with some of your friends. Those are all signs of a relationship that could become abusive, and you want to back out of there as fast as you can. So you guys now have 4 new powers to protect your friends. Believe a woman if she tells you she's being hurt, and get her connected to help. Listen for signs that a friend is rationalizing a bad relationship, and get her connected to help. Influence your guy friends to treat their girlfriends right. And women, look for red flags as you start to get involved in a relationship. Now there's some of you who are sitting here today that are having an inner monologue that goes something like this. I didn't really hit her. It was more of a slap, and it wasn't even that hard. And really, it was her fault, because she was flirting with that guy, and she knew that would push my buttons. So I got a little angry, but I've said I'm sorry, and I have been great to her ever since. This woman here today, she's not talking about me. Yes, I'm talking about you. And my biggest hope for you is that you would learn to control your anger before it controls you. And the way to do that is to get connected to an anger management program. And the hotline.org can help you with that as well. It's tempting to think that you can deal with it down the road. But the reality is it's never easier to change your behavior than now. And it's tempting to say, oh, it won't impact the rest of my life. But all you have to do is read the press to see that's not the case. Chris Brown, Grammy Award-winning singer, just spent 108 days in jail because he beat up his girlfriend. The CEO of Radium One in San Francisco, who's a multi-millionaire serial tech company entrepreneur, just had to step down from leading the company he founded because he was convicted of domestic violence. Don't be one of those guys. You guys are far, far better than that. Be the guy who takes back his power. Be the guy who cares enough about his friends and cares enough about his future to change his behavior. I was talking to my son a few days ago, and he said to me, Mom, will you be really, really clear that just because a guy is really nice in public doesn't mean he's abusive? Because otherwise, you're going to ruin my dating life. So let me be really, really clear. The vast majority of guys are great. The vast majority of guys are nice through and through. But 1 out of 9 guys is mistreating his girlfriend. He seems really nice to us in public. He treats her really well in private, or in public. But in private, he is mistreating her. And oftentimes, he is using his charm to convince all of us that that's not the case. So my hope for all of us here today is that we can accept that deeply disturbing, uncomfortable truth. You know a guy, I know a guy, we all know a guy who physically mistreats women. Because once we accept that truth, we gain tremendous power, and we can use that power to protect our friends and keep our tribe safe. Thank you.